Okay, hello. So I'm going to go through the different things that we talked about today in terms of how to add in the data from the residential sector. And there were four main things that I wanted to cover. The first is that within the Morocco 4.2 dataset, we want to go to basic parameters and change the base year to 2014 because that's the first year that we have historical data available for. Then our scenarios start in 2015 and our projections go to 2040. So we want to make sure that all these three numbers match. The second thing that I want to talk about is then how to build this structure in LEAP. So we have the number of households split by the urban households, split by electrified households, split by activity, and then split by the fuels and technologies that are used. So we're going to build this structure. And I recommend first creating this new residential branch so that we have the branch residential here to take the emission factors from. So I have residential new here, and then going to add urban. I'm going to add electrified. I'm not going to add rural at the moment. I'm not going to add rural at the moment because we can just copy and paste urban and change the values, which is an easier way to get our rural folder. Underneath electrified, I'm going to add in my different activities. Lighting, cooking. But then we can add all the rest as well. I'll just do lighting and cooking in this example. And then for each of the activities, I'm going to add in the technology. So we've got existing lighting using electricity, and then we've got efficient lighting as well. Now for cooking, when I add in the technologies, because we have technologies where there are direct emissions, I'm going to copy them from the residential branch. So I'm going to take LPG and paste it under cooking. I'm going to do the same for wood, the same for charcoal, and then I'm going to add in electricity. So I've got LPG, I've got wood, I've got charcoal, and I've got the emission factors for the 11 pollutants underneath them as well. So I've got wood, LPG. So if I look at LPG, for example, and click on average environmental loading, which is just the word for emission factor in LEAP, I have my emission factors here, and the notes here give me the source. But as we discussed, these can be easily changed to whatever value you think is more reasonable for Morocco. So now I'm just going to add in electricity as my final cooking energy source, and that's us created the structure. Once we created the structure, we then just need to enter the data and change the units of some of the variables. So I start up here, residential new. The unit for residential, for the overall activity level, is the number of households. So the top activity variable we have is the number of households, and then that is split between urban households and rural households. So the total number of households, 7,314,000. So we can enter that 314,000 just like that, or you can change the scale to 1,000, or you could do 7.314 million if you prefer. You can enter it whichever way they're equivalent. Then we have the urbanization level, 60.4% the population live in urban areas. And 100% of the urban homes are electrified. Then we get down to the different activities, cooking and lighting. And here the percentage we're using is different. It's a percent saturation. So with percent share, we would have got an error when we run LEAP, because it would have expected the sum of lighting and cooking to equal 100. That doesn't make sense, because the households can have both. Most households have both. They have lighting and they have cooking. So percent saturation solves that problem, and we're just saying what percentage of households do this activity. What percentage do lighting? What percentage do cooking? And existing, I think, is 75% in 2014. Yep, 75%. Efficient, 25%. So we've got 75% existing, and then I'm going to type in remainder 100 for efficient, or I'm going to do it the other way round. 25% and then remainder 100 for existing. The reason that I've done it the other way round is because when it comes to the baseline, the data that we have says that the efficient is going to go to 30% in 2020, 70% in 2040, and this is going to be remainder 100. So it means we don't need to change it round if I keep remainder 100 in the existing. So for the baseline, interp 2020 30% and 2040 70%. So now I have my baseline scenario with an increasing amount of efficient lighting. Can do the same for cooking. So for cooking we have 75% gas, 5% electricity, 20% charcoal. So 5% electricity, 75% gas, and then the remainder charcoal. So then we look to the baseline. The baseline, electricity would stay constant. Gas goes to 80% in 2020, 85% in 2040. So now we have all of this entered correctly. And now we need to understand what we do with the energy intensity. So I want to delete these user variables. I forgot to do that before I started making this video. I want to show you how we can create these user variables to enter these values for different for how we can create these variables. So for the energy intensity, we can enter it directly. We can enter these numbers directly if we want to. We just need to go to energy intensity, scroll down to kilowatt hours per household to get the units right, and then put in 730, and then we're done. But the other option is that we could enter it, we could enter these as different variables. So I'm going to create these new variables. I'm going to add them, and the first one, nombre appareil, and the unit I'm going to just put in unit here, because, and this is slightly different to what we talked about today, the unit is slightly different for different variables. But what I want is to define this variable so I can enter a value for cooking, for refrigeration, and for lighting. So we can enter a value at all these levels. So I'm going to put it in unit to reflect the fact that the unit changes. And then for the visibility, I want it to be demand technologies. And I'm going to say that I want it to be visible below the residential new branch. So what happens when I do that? Now I can enter these values for existing and for efficient under lighting and cooking. And if I add a new activity, I can enter a value there. So we're going to add another variable the same way. Complimage. And the unit here is hours per year, months per year, cycles per year. So I'm going to put the unit as time per year. Demand technologies. So now I can enter these values for both. And then I'm going to do the third variable. And this time for the units, it is kilowatts, kilogram, depends on what we're using. So I'm just going to put unit here as well. Now I've got my three variables. So let's enter in our energy intensity data for lighting. So we have 5 lamps, 1,460 hours per year, 0.1 and 0.025 kilowatts. So the number, I'm going to put 5, and then after a question mark I'm going to put lamps to specify exactly what unit it is. And then 1,460 hours per year. The reason that we put it with a question mark after it is because LEAP doesn't use anything written after the question mark in its calculations. So it means we can write anything, we can write notes to ourselves, and there will be no, LEAP doesn't take that into account in the calculations. 0.1 kilowatt 0.025 kilowatt. And the final thing we have to do is to enter an equation under the final energy intensity for existing and efficient. So nombre multiplied by temps de marche So they multiply together, and we've got 730 now. So I can copy that. And I've got the units incorrect. I need to change the units back to kilowatt hour so that it becomes correct. So now I've got the correct value, 730 and 182 here. So now I've got those right. And we can do this exactly the same for cooking. We need to enter in the correct equation, and then we need to enter the data for each of these, remembering to put the units. And we just follow that process for each of the other activities. Once we are done with urban, we can then copy the whole of the urban branch and paste it under rural. And this may take a moment. It's taking all of the urban branches and creating a copy. And we can then rename that copy rural. So now instead of urban here, we can rename this rural. And instead of 60.4, we can just type in remainder 100, and it will calculate what percentage is rural. So I hope that's a little bit clearer in terms of how we enter the data into LEAP. Please let me know if you have any questions, and we would be happy to answer them. Thank you.